My name is Helen Parker, 28 years old, and my wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, my sister Bianca stood up in the middle of our vows and screamed, "This wedding is a joke. You are marrying a waiter, Helen." How pathetic. The room fell silent. I wanted to disappear. But my soon-to-be husband Marcus squeezed my hand and whispered, "Should we tell her who I really am?" I shook my head. The surprise would come later. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments, and do not forget to like and subscribe to hear how my sister learned an unforgettable lesson about judging people. I grew up in an affluent neighborhood in Boston, where success was measured by the size of your bank account and the prestige of your last name. My father, Thomas Parker, was the chief executive officer of a major financial firm that managed billions in assets. Every morning, he would leave our sprawling colonial home, in his tailored suit briefcase in hand, ready to conquer another day in the corporate world. He expected nothing less than perfection from his family, especially his daughters. My mother, Eleanor Parker, was the quintessential socialite. Her calendar was always filled with charity galas, country club luncheons, and social events where Boston's elite gathered. She took pride in our family image, carefully curating every aspect of our public lives. From our wardrobes to our educational choices, everything had to reflect the Parker standard of excellence. Then there was my younger sister Bianca. Just 2 years younger than me at 26, Bianca had always been the golden child. With her perfect blonde hair, striking blue eyes, and natural charisma, she embodied everything our parents valued. She was ambitious, calculating, and knew exactly how to play the social game. From the moment she was born, our parents showered her with attention and praise, creating an unspoken hierarchy in our household. Our relationship had always been complicated. As children, we shared secrets and dreams like most sisters do. But as we grew older, the differences between us became more pronounced. Bianca developed a sense of superiority that created a wedge between us. She measured people by their net worth, their connections, and what they could offer her. Anyone who did not meet her standards was deemed unworthy of her time. "Why would you waste your time with people who cannot even afford a decent car?" she once asked me when I invited my college friends over. "You know what Dad says about surrounding yourself with successful people." I was different. Despite growing up with privilege, I found myself drawn to simpler things. While Bianca followed in our father's footsteps, studying business at an Ivy League university, I pursued education. Teaching young minds brought me joy that no luxury shopping spree ever could. This choice became the first major disappointment I delivered to my family. Education. "Helen, do you realize how much potential you are wasting?" My father had said, his voice heavy with disapproval. "The Parker name opens doors to the most prestigious careers, and you choose to become a teacher." The pressure to date appropriately was even worse. My parents regularly orchestrated dinner parties and social gatherings with the explicit purpose of introducing me to eligible bachelors from wealthy families. These men were carbon copies of my father's ambitious status, conscious and utterly boring to me. They talked about their investment portfolios and vacation homes, while my mind wandered to the book I was reading with my 5th grade class. The painful memory of my 16th birthday still lingered in my mind. I had been dating Michael, a kind-hearted boy from my high school, who worked at the local library. When he arrived at my birthday party with a thoughtfully wrapped book and handwritten card, Bianca publicly humiliated him. "Is that all you could afford?" she had laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Helen, your standards are shockingly low." Michael never called me again after that night, and something inside me hardened against my sister. By the time I turned 23, I had enough. I moved out of our family mansion, found a modest apartment near the elementary school where I taught, and refused any financial assistance from my parents. It was the first time I truly felt free, even if my bank account was significantly smaller. "You will come running back when you realize how difficult the real world is," my father had predicted when I packed my belongings. I never did. Instead, I built a life I was proud of. my tiny apartment became a sanctuary filled with books, plants, and mismatched furniture that told stories of flea market adventures. My colleagues became true friends who valued me for my ideas and compassion, not my family name. My relationship with my family grew increasingly distant. Holiday gatherings became tense affairs, where we exchanged pleasantries and avoided any meaningful conversation. Bianca would arrive with stories of her latest achievements and acquisitions, while our parents beamed with pride. I would sit quietly feeling like an outsider in my own family. Helen still playing with children all day, Bianca would ask with a thinly veiled smirk. How adorable. I learned to brush off these comments, but they still stung. Deep down, I yearned for my family to accept me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. But as years passed, I realized that might never happen. So I focused on building my own happiness, unaware that a chance encounter would soon change everything. It was a Friday evening in May, when my life took an unexpected turn. After a particularly challenging week of parent-teacher conferences, my colleagues suggested we treat ourselves to dinner at Lumiere, an upscale French restaurant downtown. Under normal circumstances, I would have declined. The place was far beyond my teacher's budget, but it was the end of the school year and we all deserved a celebration. The restaurant was everything you would expect from a five-star establishment: crystal chandeliers, plush velvet chairs, and an atmosphere of refined elegance. We were seated at a corner table, with a view of the Boston skyline glittering against the night sky. As I settled into my chair feeling slightly out of place in my simple black dress, he appeared beside our table. "Good evening, ladies. My name is Marcus, and I will be your server tonight." I looked up and met the warmest brown eyes I had ever seen. Marcus was tall with broad shoulders and a gentle smile that immediately put me at ease. His voice carried a quiet confidence that stood out in this pretentious setting. When he handed me the menu, our fingers brushed briefly, and I felt an unexpected flutter in my chest. "Is this your first time dining with us?" he asked, his attention seemingly focused on me despite addressing the entire table. "Yes," I replied, suddenly aware of how dry my throat felt. "Any recommendations?" What followed was not the standard server script about the specials of the day. Instead, Marcus spoke passionately about each dish, describing the ingredients, as if telling a story. He knew where the saffron in the bouillabaisse was sourced, the perfect wine pairing for the coq au vin, and even offered suggestions based on what he intuited about our preferences. "For you," he said, looking directly at me, "I would recommend the duck confit with cherry reduction. It has a beautiful balance of richness and acidity. Something tells me you appreciate nuance." My colleagues exchanged knowing glances as I felt my cheeks warm. There was something about the way Marcus spoke, the intelligence behind his eyes, that intrigued me far more than any of the wealthy men my parents had pushed my way over the years. After that evening, I found myself returning to Lumiere far more frequently than my salary should have allowed. Sometimes with friends, often alone, always requesting Marcus as my server. Our interactions evolved from professional courtesies to friendly conversations. I learned he worked evenings at the restaurant while taking courses during the day. He asked thoughtful questions about my teaching experiences and remembered details about my students that I had mentioned weeks prior. "How did Tommy do on his science project?" he would ask. Or, "Did you finish reading that novel you mentioned last time?" After a month of these dinner visits, Marcus finally asked the question I had been hoping for. "I hope this is not inappropriate, but would you like to join me for coffee sometime? When I am not working, of course." Our first date was nothing like I expected. Instead of taking me to an expensive restaurant or trendy bar, Marcus invited me to a small art exhibition in a converted warehouse. The space showcased works from emerging local artists, with proceeds supporting art programs in underserved schools. "I thought this might interest you given your passion for education," he explained as we wandered through the gallery. What struck me most that evening was Marcus's knowledge. He spoke about the various artistic techniques with unexpected expertise, analyzing brushstrokes and color theory, as if he had studied fine arts for years. When our conversation shifted to current economic trends affecting education funding, he offered insights that revealed a sophisticated understanding of financial systems. "How do you know all this?" I asked, genuinely curious about this server, who seemed to possess knowledge well beyond his profession. "I read a lot," he answered with a modest smile. "And I listen. You can learn so much just by paying attention to the world around you." As weeks turned into months, I found myself falling deeply in love with Marcus. He was ambitious, yet humble, intelligent, without being condescending, and treated everyone with equal respect, whether they were the restaurant's head chef or the parking attendant. He made me laugh with witty observations and challenged my thinking with thoughtful questions. Yet there were mysteries about him that I could not quite unravel. Sometimes his phone would ring, and he would step away to take calls in private, returning with a slightly distracted expression. When I asked about his family, he provided vague answers about growing up in Chicago, with parents who worked in business. He never invited me to his apartment, always meeting at my place, or public locations. "I have terrible roommates," he would joke when I asked. "Trust me, you do not want to see that disaster." These peculiarities might have raised red flags with someone else, but I trusted Marcus. The connection between us felt genuine and deep. Unlike the men from my parents' social circle who tried to impress me with status symbols, Marcus won me over with his character, his kindness, and the way he looked at me as if I were the most fascinating person he had ever met. "I love that you chose teaching," he told me one evening, as we walked along the Charles River. "It takes courage to follow your passion, instead of chasing money or status." No one in my life had ever validated my choices that way. With Marcus, I felt seen for who I truly was, not who someone wanted me to be. I had found something rare and precious, a man who valued substance over surface just as I did, or so I thought at the time. Little did I know that Marcus had secrets of his own secrets that would eventually turn my world upside down. After 6 months of dating, Marcus and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We spent weekends exploring hidden corners of Boston, cooking together in my tiny kitchen, and having deep conversations that lasted until dawn. I was happier than I had ever been, but there was one cloud hanging over our relationship. He still had not met my family. I had been avoiding this introduction, knowing how judgmental they could be. But as our relationship grew more serious, I knew I could not put it off any longer. One Sunday morning, as we lazed in bed, planning our day, I broached the subject. "I think it is time you met my parents and Bianca," I said, tracing patterns on his chest with my finger. "Just be prepared. They can be difficult." Marcus kissed the top of my head. "I can handle difficult people. I serve them dinner every night. Remember." If only it were that simple. In the days leading up to the dinner, I tried to prepare Marcus for what awaited him. I warned him about my father's interrogation style, my mother's passive-aggressive comments, and Bianca's cutting remarks. I even suggested responses he could give to potential questions about his career and background. "Just be yourself," he said with that calm confidence I loved. "If they cannot see how happy we are together, that is their loss." The evening of the dinner arrived, and I felt sick with anxiety as we pulled up to my parents' mansion in my beat-up Honda Civic. The contrast between my car and the luxury vehicles in the circular driveway could not have been more stark. "Impressive," Marcus whispered, taking in the columned entrance and manicured gardens. "Very different from where you live now." "This is not me," I replied, squeezing his hand. "Remember that." My mother greeted us at the door, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she assessed Marcus from head to toe. She was wearing a designer dress and pearls for what was supposedly a casual family dinner. "Helen, darling," she air-kissed both my cheeks. "And you must be Marcus. We have heard so little about you." The dining room was intimidating with its crystal chandelier, antique furniture, and table, set with the fine china reserved for important guests. My father stood at the head of the table, whiskey in hand, while Bianca lounged in a chair scrolling through her phone. "So, Marcus," my father began once we were seated, and the first course was served. Helen tells us, you work at Lumiere. What position do you hold there? Sommelier manager. Marcus placed his napkin on his lap. I am a server, sir. Have been for about 3 years now. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's fork paused midway to her mouth. My father's eyebrows shot up. Bianca did not even try to hide her smirk. A server, my father repeated slowly, as if the word tasted bitter in his mouth. And is that a temporary situation while you pursue other goals? I enjoy my work, Marcus replied calmly. It allows me to interact with interesting people and learn about different aspects of the hospitality industry. What followed was an uncomfortable interrogation disguised as dinner conversation. My father asked about Marcus's education, some college focusing on business courses, his family background, middle class from the Chicago area, and his 5-year plan, continuing to grow and learn in my current industry. With each answer, I could see my parents' disapproval deepening. They exchanged glances across the table, the kind I had seen countless times when they encountered someone they deemed beneath them. Bianca, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up during dessert. Well, I think it is wonderful, she said with a sweetness that immediately put me on edge. My sister has finally found someone at her level. Not everyone is meant for greatness after all. Bianca, I warned, feeling my cheeks burn with anger. She continued as if I had not spoken. I mean, Helen chose to become a teacher when she could have joined Dad's firm. It makes perfect sense that she would date a waiter rather than someone more ambitious. Marcus placed his hand over mine under the table, a silent gesture of support. I find ambition comes in many forms, he replied evenly. Helen's commitment to shaping young minds is one of the most ambitious pursuits I can imagine. It takes real courage to choose fulfillment over status. My father cleared his throat. Yes, well, we had hoped Helen would eventually come to her senses about her career choices, perhaps with the right influence. I think Helen's sensibilities are just fine, Marcus interjected, with a politeness that barely masked his displeasure. She knows what brings her joy, and she pursues it authentically. That is something to admire. After an excruciating 2 hours, dinner finally concluded. As we prepared to leave, my mother pulled me aside in the hallway, while Marcus retrieved our coats. Darling, I know you think you are happy, but be realistic, she whispered urgently. What kind of future can you have with someone who serves food for a living? Your father could introduce you to James Sullivan's son next week. He just made partner at his law firm. Before I could respond, my father joined us. Helen, you are a Parker. You could do so much better than this. Think about what you are throwing away. Bianca sauntered over, adding her unwanted opinion. At least we will get discounted meals at Lumiere. That is something, right? She laughed at her own joke. I had reached my limit. Marcus is kind, intelligent, and treats me with respect. That is more than I can say for how any of you have treated me tonight. He may be a server, but he has more class than this entire room combined. I grabbed Marcus's hand and stormed out, fighting back tears until we were safely in my car. Once inside, I broke down, apologizing profusely for my family's behavior. Marcus simply pulled me into his arms. Hey, it is okay. Their opinion of me does not matter. Only yours does. They were horrible to you, I sobbed against his shirt. They are afraid, he said thoughtfully. People who measure worth by status and money are often afraid of losing those things. It makes them judge harshly. I pulled back to look at him, amazed by his composure. You are not angry. He smiled, wiping a tear from my cheek. Why would I be angry about someone else's limitations? I know who I am, Helen, and more importantly, I know who you are. That is all that matters. In that moment, sitting in my old car outside my parents' mansion, I fell even deeper in love with Marcus. He had faced my family's worst behavior and emerged with dignity intact. What I did not know then was that Marcus had reasons beyond mere emotional maturity for his calm response to my family's judgment. A year into our relationship, Marcus and I had settled into a comfortable routine that felt like home. The disaster dinner with my family had actually strengthened our bond, and while I maintained minimal contact with my parents and Bianca, Marcus and I were happier than ever. On a crisp autumn Sunday, Marcus suggested we visit the Boston Public Garden. It was a perfect October day, with golden leaves crunching beneath our feet and the sunlight filtering through the trees. We stopped to watch the swan boats glide across the pond, my head resting on his shoulder. "Let us walk over to the willow grove," he suggested, taking my hand. "I heard it is beautiful this time of year." The secluded spot under the weeping willows was indeed breathtaking, the cascading branches, creating a private sanctuary. Marcus suddenly seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. He fidgeted with something in his pocket and cleared his throat several times. "Helen," he finally said, turning to face me, "this past year has shown me what true happiness feels like. You loved me when you thought I had nothing to offer but myself." Before I could respond, he dropped to one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a stunning diamond ring that caught the sunlight, sending prisms of color dancing around us. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice filled with emotion. Tears sprang to my eyes as I nodded, too overcome to speak. When he slipped the ring onto my finger, I gasped at its beauty. The center diamond was larger than anything I would have expected, surrounded by smaller stones in an intricate vintage setting. "Marcus, this must have cost a fortune," I whispered once I found my voice. "How did you afford this on a server's salary?" He kissed me softly. "I have been saving for a long time. Some things are worth every penny." It was the first of many moments that made me wonder if there was more to Marcus than he had revealed. The ring was easily worth several months of his salary, possibly more. But I was too happy to dwell on it, choosing instead to bask in the joy of our engagement. When I called my parents to share the news, their reaction was predictably negative. My mother gasped in horror while my father demanded I come to my senses. "Helen, you cannot possibly be serious," my mother said, her voice tight with disapproval, marrying a waiter. "What will we tell our friends?" "Tell them your daughter is marrying a man who makes her happy," I replied firmly. "Or tell them nothing at all. I do not need your approval." Bianca's reaction was even worse. She called me directly, something she rarely did. "Are you pregnant?" she asked bluntly. "Because that is the only reason I can imagine for this rushed engagement to someone so beneath you." "He is not beneath me, Bianca. And no, I am not pregnant. I am in love." She scoffed. "Love does not pay bills, Helen. Wake up. He probably just wants access to the Parker money." "Marcus has never asked me for money. He does not even let me pay when we go out." "Of course not. He is playing the long game. Men like him always do." I hung up on her, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. Not about Marcus's character, but about his financial situation. How was he able to afford our dates, the engagement ring, and his general lifestyle on a server's income? The questions multiplied as we began planning our wedding. When I suggested a simple ceremony at a local botanical garden, Marcus surprised me by proposing the Langham, one of Boston's most luxurious hotels. "It is too expensive," I protested. "We cannot afford that." "Let me worry about the cost," he said with a mysterious smile. "I have connections." Those connections became increasingly evident as our wedding plans progressed. When we visited the Langham to discuss arrangements, the hotel manager greeted Marcus like an old friend, offering us complimentary champagne and the best package available. "Mr. Evans, always a pleasure," the manager said, shaking Marcus's hand warmly. "We will ensure your special day exceeds expectations." In the car afterward, I asked Marcus how he knew the manager so well. "I have served many important clients at Lumiere," he explained. "Some of them work in the hospitality industry. You would be surprised how many doors open when you provide excellent service." I accepted his explanation, but other incidents continued to puzzle me. Marcus would occasionally disappear for staff meetings that lasted hours. Once, while waiting for him outside Lumiere, I spotted him deep in conversation with Walter Reynolds, the CEO of New England's largest hotel chain. They were not talking like server and customer, but like equals discussing something with animated gestures and shared laughter. When I mentioned seeing him with Reynolds, Marcus shrugged it off. He is a regular at the restaurant. Nice guy, actually listens when servers make suggestions. Even stranger was Bianca's frustrated report, after hiring a private investigator to dig into Marcus's background. Yes, my sister had actually gone that far. The investigator found nothing suspicious, she complained during one of our rare phone calls. Just a clean record, some college courses, and standard employment history. It is almost too perfect, like someone crafted his background deliberately. Or maybe he is just a good person with nothing to hide, I suggested, though I was secretly relieved the investigation had turned up empty. Despite these lingering questions, my trust in Marcus never wavered. I had seen his character, his kindness, his integrity, in countless small moments that could not be faked. If he had secrets, I believed they were not malicious ones. As our wedding day approached, the mysteries surrounding Marcus faded into the background of my consciousness. I was marrying the man I loved regardless of what my family thought or what secrets he might be keeping. Little did I know that all would be revealed in the most dramatic way possible, with my sister as the unwitting catalyst. The morning of my wedding dawned with clear blue skies and golden sunshine streaming through the windows of my hotel suite. It should have been a perfect start to the most important day of my life, but anxiety churned in my stomach as I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone. No messages from my parents confirming they would attend. No kind words from Bianca. Just silence that spoke volumes about their disapproval. My maid of honor, Lily, my closest friend and fellow teacher, bustled around the room organizing my makeup veil and the something borrowed something blue traditions. "Stop checking your phone," she scolded gently, taking it from my hands. "Today is about you and Marcus, not about who shows up." She was right, of course. I took a deep breath and allowed myself to be swept into the preparations. The makeup artist arrived, followed by the hairstylist, and gradually the bride in the mirror began to look less like a nervous wreck and more like the confident woman Marcus fell in love with. My wedding dress was simpler than what my mother would have chosen. No extravagant ball gown or 10-foot train. Instead, I had selected an elegant, A-line dress with delicate lace overlay and subtle beading that caught the light when I moved. It felt like me, not like the Parker heiress my family wanted me to be. When we arrived at the Langham, I gasped in surprise. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed beyond my wildest expectations. Cascading white orchids and roses created an enchanted garden atmosphere, with crystal chandeliers dimmed to cast a romantic glow over the space. The elegance of the setting far exceeded what our budget should have allowed. "How did we afford all this?" I whispered to Lily as we peeked into the ballroom before the ceremony. "Marcus said not to worry about it," she replied with a shrug. "Something about vendor relationships and calling in favors." Before I could ponder this further, the wedding planner whisked me away to a private room to await the ceremony. Through the door, I could hear guests arriving, their voices creating a gentle hum of anticipation. Out of curiosity, I asked the planner for the guest list. 237 confirmed attendees, she reported, checking her tablet. "That cannot be right," I said, frowning. "We only invited about 100 people." She showed me the tablet screen displaying the full list. To my astonishment, it included names I recognized from business magazines and newspaper articles, executives from major corporations, prominent figures in the hospitality industry, even a few minor celebrities. People I had never met but who apparently knew Marcus well enough to attend our wedding. As I tried to make sense of this, there was a knock at the door. My father entered, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo, but mercifully sober. "Your mother and I decided we could not miss our daughter's wedding regardless of our reservations," he said stiffly. I stood and smoothed my dress. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot to me." "Helen," he began hesitantly, "who are all these people?" "I just spoke with James Wellington from First Boston Bank. I have been trying to get a meeting with him for months, and he is here at your wedding saying wonderful things about your fiancé." Before I could formulate a response, The wedding planner announced it was time to begin. My father offered his arm, and we took our positions for the processional. As the music started and the doors opened, I caught my first glimpse of Marcus waiting at the altar. He looked breathtakingly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, his eyes finding mine immediately filled with love and something else. Relief, perhaps. As if a weight was about to be lifted. Walking down the aisle, I noticed my mother and Bianca seated in the front row, both looking tense and confused by the opulent surroundings and unfamiliar faces. My mother managed a tight smile, but Bianca's expression was thunderous. When I reached Marcus, he took my hands in his and whispered, "You are absolutely beautiful. Ready to start our life together." The ceremony proceeded perfectly until we reached the exchange of vows. Marcus had just finished his heartfelt promises when it happened. Bianca suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This wedding is a joke," she shouted, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. "You are marrying a waiter, Helen. How pathetic." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother covered her face in mortification, while my father half rose from his seat, unsure whether to restrain Bianca or join her protest. "Do you all know who she is marrying?" Bianca continued, gesturing wildly. "A server. A man who brings food to tables for a living. The Parker family deserves better than this farce." I stood frozen in humiliation, tears threatening to spill. The beautiful day I had imagined was crumbling around me, but then I felt Marcus squeeze my hand gently, and I looked up to see him smiling. Not an embarrassed smile, not an angry one, but an expression of almost amused confidence. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Should we tell her who I really am?" Through my tears, I shook my head slightly. Let her find out with everyone else." Bianca, interpreting our whispers as distress, seemed satisfied with the damage she had caused. With a final scornful look, she grabbed her purse and stormed down the aisle and out of the ballroom, the heavy doors slamming behind her. An uncomfortable silence hung in the air until the officiant cleared his throat. "Shall we continue with the ceremony?" I took a deep breath and nodded, determined not to let my sister ruin this moment. "Yes, please." The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur. We exchanged rings, the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, and Marcus kissed me with such tenderness that for a moment I forgot about Bianca's outburst and the confused guests. As we turned to face our audience as a married couple, I noticed something strange. Rather than looks of pity or embarrassment, many guests were watching us with knowing smiles, as if they were in on a secret I had yet to discover. My parents remained in their seats, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, my father's expression unreadable. We proceeded down the aisle together, husband and wife at last stepping into a new chapter, neither my family nor I could have anticipated. The truth about Marcus was about to be revealed, and nothing would ever be the same. The wedding reception was scheduled to begin after a brief cocktail hour, giving guests time to mingle while Marcus and I took photos. As we posed for the photographer in the hotel's lush garden, I could not shake the memory of Bianca's outburst. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "I am so sorry about my sister," I said, fighting back fresh tears. "She had no right to embarrass you like that." He smiled, a knowing gleam in his eyes. "Do not worry about Bianca. I have a feeling she will be the one feeling embarrassed very soon." Before I could ask what he meant, we were ushered back inside for our grand entrance. The ballroom had been transformed yet again, now featuring elegant table settings with towering floral centerpieces, a dance floor, and a stage where a live band played soft jazz. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the scene, and waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked more appropriate for a presidential dinner than a teacher's wedding. As we entered, the guests rose to their feet applauding. I scanned the crowd and was surprised to see Bianca had returned, standing at the back with a sullen expression. My parents were at their assigned table, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the high-profile guests. During dinner, I noticed people approaching our table continuously, not just to offer congratulations, but to speak with Marcus specifically. CEOs, financial executives, and hospitality magnates greeted him with respect bordering on deference. They discussed business matters in hushed tones, using industry jargon I did not fully understand before moving on with knowing smiles. My father watched these interactions with growing confusion, while my mother kept adjusting her jewelry as if suddenly concerned it was not expensive enough. Bianca simply glared from her table, nursing a glass of champagne. After the main course, Marcus squeezed my hand and stood up gently, tapping his glass with a spoon. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. "First, I want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate our love," he began, smiling down at me, "especially Helen's family, who I know had their reservations about me." A knowing chuckle rippled through the crowd, increasing my confusion. "For those of you who know me through business, thank you for keeping my little secret these past couple of years. For those who do not know me well, particularly my new family members, I believe some introductions are in order." Marcus took a deep breath, and I saw a weight visibly lift from his shoulders. "My name is Marcus Evans, and while I have indeed been working as a server at Lumiere, that is not my primary occupation. I am the founder and CEO of Evans Hospitality Group, which owns Lumiere, along with 27 other restaurants and 15 luxury hotels across the country, including the Langham, where we are gathered today." Gasps echoed through the room, the loudest from my family's table. I sat frozen in shock, trying to process this revelation. I began working in my own restaurants years ago, starting in the kitchens and moving to every position. My philosophy has always been that to lead effectively in hospitality, you must understand every aspect of the business. I still take shifts at different locations regularly, which is how I had the good fortune to meet Helen. He turned to me, his eyes filled with love and a touch of apology. "I did not tell you the truth immediately, because throughout my life people have valued me for my success and wealth rather than who I am as a person. When you treated me with respect and kindness, believing I was just a server, I knew you were different. I fell in love with your genuine heart, your passion for teaching, and the way you chose your own path, despite pressure to conform." He addressed the room again. "I kept my identity private because I wanted to be sure Helen loved me for myself, not my assets or status. And she did, even defending me to her family when they looked down on my supposed profession." At this point, I glanced over at my family's table. My father's mouth hung open in shock. My mother had gone pale, gripping the edge of the tablecloth, and Bianca, who had apparently re-entered during Marcus's speech, stood frozen in the doorway, her expression a mixture of disbelief and mortification. Marcus continued. To address the elephant in the room, "Yes, there was an unfortunate outburst during our ceremony, but I hold no grudges. Judgment based on appearances and titles is all too common in our society. I hope today serves as a reminder that worth is not determined by job titles or bank accounts." He raised his glass. "To my beautiful wife Helen, who loved the server, not the CEO, I promise to spend my life being worthy of that pure love." Applause erupted as Marcus sat down beside me. I was still processing everything, emotions swirling like a hurricane inside me. "Why did you not tell me?" I whispered, tears forming in my eyes. He took my hands in his. "At first I was going to after our third date, but then you mentioned how your family judged people by their wealth and status. I wanted to be sure what we had was real, untainted by my position. The longer I waited, the harder it became to find the right moment. I hope you can forgive me." Before I could respond, my parents approached our table, their expressions a mixture of shock and embarrassment. "Marcus, we had no idea," my father stammered, extending his hand. "Please accept our most sincere apologies for how we treated you." My mother nodded vigorously. "We would love to have you both over for dinner soon to start fresh. Perhaps discuss some business opportunities as well." I cringed at their transparent attempt to salvage both their dignity and potential business connections. Marcus shook my father's hand, but kept his response measured. "Thank you for the apology, though. I want to be clear. I am not interested in relationships, business or personal, that are based on my financial status rather than genuine respect. That includes my relationship with my new in-laws." They retreated, chastened, as Bianca approached next. Her face was flushed with embarrassment, her earlier confidence completely deflated. "Marcus, I did not know," she began, her voice uncharacteristically small. "What I said at the ceremony was unforgivable, but if you could somehow—" It was very revealing. Marcus interrupted calmly. "Not about me, but about you, Bianca. You showed everyone exactly who you are and what you value. I suggest you take this as an opportunity for reflection." She turned to me, desperation in her eyes. "Helen, you have to understand, I was just looking out for you. I thought he was taking advantage." I shook my head. "No, Bianca. You were not protecting me. You were protecting your own ego and our family's image. You tried to humiliate the man I love on our wedding day. That says everything about your character." As she slunk away, Marcus and I rose for our first dance. As we swayed to the music, surrounded by twinkling lights and the warmth of genuine well-wishers, I finally felt the weight of family expectations lift from my shoulders. "Are you disappointed?" Marcus whispered against my hair. "That your husband is not just a humble server after all?" I pulled back to look into his eyes. "The only thing I am disappointed about is that you felt you had to hide who you are. I fell in love with your kindness, your intelligence, your integrity. Those things have not changed. The size of your bank account is just details." He smiled, pulling me closer. "That is exactly why I fell in love with you, Helen Evans." As we danced, I caught sight of Bianca standing alone at the edge of the room, watching us with an unreadable expression. For the first time in my life, I felt no need for her approval or understanding. I had found my own path to happiness, one that had led me to a love more genuine than anything my family's world of status and appearances could have offered. Life after our wedding took on a dreamlike quality. Marcus and I moved into a stunning penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the sunrise each morning. The space was elegant, yet comfortable, with bookshelves lining the walls and cozy reading nooks that made the grand apartment feel like home. Despite my husband's considerable wealth, I insisted on continuing my teaching career. The fifth graders at Woodward Elementary did not care that Mrs. Evans was married to a hotel magnate. To them, I was still the teacher who got excited about science experiments and stayed after school to help with reading difficulties. This normalcy kept me grounded as I adjusted to my new reality. "You do not have to work, you know," Marcus said one evening as I graded papers at our dining table. "Not that I want you to quit. I love that you are passionate about teaching." "I need to work," I explained. "Not for the money, obviously, but because teaching is part of who I am. I would feel lost without it." He nodded in understanding, and I fell in love with him all over again for that simple acceptance. My relationship with my family underwent a slow, sometimes painful transformation in the months following our wedding. My parents predictably became eager to rebuild connections now that they knew Marcus's true identity. Their initial attempts were transparent, with invitations to exclusive country club events and not-so-subtle mentions of business opportunities. "We always knew Helen had excellent judgment," my mother told her friends at a charity gala, conveniently forgetting her previous dismissal of my relationship. "Marcus is such a wonderful addition to our family." I maintained a polite but distant relationship with them, accepting occasional dinner invitations, but setting clear boundaries. Marcus was remarkably gracious, never mentioning their previous treatment of him, though he gently declined my father's persistent attempts to discuss potential business ventures. Bianca was a different story altogether. The public humiliation she had suffered at our wedding had shaken her to her core. For weeks, she avoided family gatherings and declined my attempts to reach out. When she finally agreed to meet me for coffee 3 months after the wedding, I barely recognized the subdued woman who slid into the chair across from me. "I do not expect you to forgive me," she said, stirring her latte without meeting my eyes. "What I did was unforgivable." "Why did you do it, Bianca?" I asked, genuinely wanting to understand. Was embarrassing me really worth it? She was quiet for a long moment. "I was jealous," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not of Marcus, obviously, since I thought he was just a server. I was jealous of your happiness, of how you found contentment without following the path our parents set for us. You could have made your own choices too, I pointed out. I know that now, but I have spent my entire life measuring success by our parents' standards, prestige, wealth, status. When you rejected those values and still found happiness, it made me question everything I had been working for. She looked up, tears in her eyes, and it was easier to tear you down than to face those questions. That coffee meeting was the first of many conversations, as Bianca slowly worked to rebuild our relationship. It was not easy. Trust once broken does not mend overnight. But I saw genuine changes in my sister as she reevaluated her priorities and began making choices based on her own happiness, rather than our parents' expectations. 6 months after our wedding, she left her high-pressure corporate job to pursue a long-ignored passion for interior design. A year later, she was dating a kindergarten teacher. She met through me, a kind man whose bank account would never impress our father, but whose character made Bianca genuinely happy. As for me, healing came gradually. The pain of my family's rejection had cut deep, leaving scars that would always be part of my story. But with Marcus's unwavering support and love, I learned to look at those scars not as reminders of hurt but as evidence of my strength and growth. You know what I admire most about you, Marcus said one evening, as we walked along the beach near our weekend home on Cape Cod. Your capacity for forgiveness, without compromising your values. You have given your family a chance to change, without letting them pull you back into their world. He was right. I had found a balance maintaining relationships with my family while staying true to myself. It was not perfect, but it was honest, and that mattered more than any facade of family harmony. Marcus and I used our position and resources to create opportunities for others. We established a foundation that provided scholarships for education students and funded arts programs in underserved schools. Marcus continued his practice of working shifts in his hotels and restaurants, believing that leadership required understanding every aspect of the business. The greatest lesson I learned through my journey was that true value has nothing to do with job titles, bank accounts, or social status. It lies in integrity, kindness, and the courage to live authentically, even when others judge or criticize. Marcus had demonstrated this by working as a server, despite his wealth, finding joy in the work itself rather than the prestige it might or might not carry. My sister had learned it the hard way through public humiliation and private soul-searching, and I had discovered it by following my heart, even when my family tried to convince me it was leading me astray. Life is not about the impressions we make or the appearances we maintain. It is about the connections we build, the lives we touch, and the love we share. Sometimes the most valuable treasures come in unexpected packages, and those who judge by outward appearances miss the true richness life has to offer. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their job or appearance, only to discover there was so much more beneath the surface? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that true worth goes far deeper than titles or status. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the greatest surprises come when we open our hearts to seeing people for who they truly are, not what they do for a living.